Everybody that's listening, if you're a first timer, please like, subscribe, share this interview. If you're listening to us on the radio, we appreciate that. We have a returning guest on the program. It's Dustoff is the book. He's a Vietnam veteran, and we want to tell him welcome home as we start the interview. It's Arnold Sampson. Arnold, thanks so much for coming back on. Really appreciate you doing this again.
Rob, it's a privilege and a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So let's kick this around. I mean, I know last time we spoke more in depth about the book. I do want to do a quick synopsis on the book. So we start off with that. If you can tell people, and I do hope people that are, want to hear more about the book, do look back into the past episodes because we did do a full 30, 40 minutes on the book. So definitely just type in Arnold's name. It'll come up for sure. But just a quick synopsis about the book and how it came about as we start.
Well, I reflected on my time in my year in Vietnam. I've come to admire veterans who had done 2 tours or more, but my tour was more than enough. That one tour was more than enough, and but more I thought about what had happened, the more I thought that writing about my experiences might clear my head some and kind of reorder my perspective. So I wrote about the some things that occurred during the year and how, in fact, the things leading up to me deciding to go to flight school, which is aviator training, and ultimately experiences that occurred during the year tour. My job was I was a medical evacuation helicopter pilot. And the call sign for the official mission doing that is Dustoff. Any aircraft in Vietnam could stop and pick up a hurt, wounded, injured, sick person, and that would be an evacuation, certainly. But we were the ones who flew with a medic and a crew chief, no guns, 2 pilots, 4-man crew, no machine guns, and we had a Red Cross on the nose and a Red Cross on the doors. I didn't at the time realize, you look back at things, how much we were thought of as heroes because a wounded man in the middle of nowhere, in the mud, in the jungle, thinking no one's going to come and get me. I'm a goner. I feel terrible. I'm going to die here. And they know we call for a dust off. We call for a dust off, and then you hear this whoop 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 of the helicopter blades, and it was us coming to get him. And sometimes they were still shooting. They might say, they may have said, "Have you dust off 85? Do you have gunbirds with you?" And I'd say, "Well, no, I didn't have time to get them. What's your situation on the ground?" I mean, it wasn't me being heroic. It was me, frankly, just thinking, if I go into orbit, just sort of flying around in orbit in a holding pattern, waiting for gunships to come, I'll be more nervous than I want to be. I'll be a nervous Purvis. So I said, look, I'm coming in. I'm going to try to sneak in, get the guy, and if we take fire, let us know. Well, cover us. Let us know that you got our back. Well, truth is, kind of reckless, but it did work. And oftentimes we would extract somebody who would have died otherwise and got them to a medical facility. There's talk of the golden hour, that if you get a person into medical care within an hour of their trauma, that there's a greater chance that they'll live. Well, that was not a saying back then, but in actuality, that's what happened. We oftentimes were able to get someone to a medical facility out of the sticks and into a medical facility within an hour. And I think many of those men lived, and then I think that they have had offspring who are walking the earth today. So that's a good feeling. So the book capitalized all those things that occurred.
Do you feel like the perception of the war has changed? Obviously, at that time, you were there. You knew people were not happy about the war, and they took it out on the men that were fighting the war. It's not the men that fighting the war's fault. They weren't the ones that wanted to go into Vietnam. Those were the politicians and the military industrial complex that
Right,
kicked in at that time.
right.
Has anything changed, or is it still about the same as far as what people think of Vietnam in your mind?
I think that Ken Burns did a
Mhm.
special on an educational special on Vietnam, and I think that the people having now spoken with Vietnam veterans, relatives of theirs, neighbors, co-workers, um, offspring or children of people gone to Vietnam, have it's had improved their view of what was going on there. That we were there because we were ordered to be there. We did the best we could to defend South Vietnam, and we saved lives, and we protected that country as long as we could. And at some point, when it was time to go, we left. But I think we did do some good, and that we certainly were not the baby killers and the monsters that protesters at the time may have described us as. But I'm not mad at them, by the way. They were doing what they had to do. War is a nasty thing, and so I won't argue with their fundamental philosophy of can't we all get along. Um, but frankly, I think the perception of the war has improved, and the perception of the people who took part in it has improved. It was a sacrifice for anyone who went there to be there and what I'll call an oven. It was an oven.
The
An
book
oven
is
with
again.
bullets.
Go ahead, Arnold. I'm sorry.
No, Rob, I'm sorry. What did you say?
No, I was just gonna talk. Just say the book. Go ahead. No, I'd like you to finish. I can edit that out. So go ahead.
I was just saying it was an oven where bullets were being fired, and so it was to take young guys away. The average veteran, many veterans. I don't know what averages. Many of those Vietnam veterans were 18, 19-year-old guys. Many draftees, some volunteers, and they they fought the good fight. They put on their uniforms, trained on their weapons, and went out and defended the landscape that they were told to defend. And but many of them, as we now know, 58,000 is one of the numbers mentioned, did not come home. So it took a heavy toll over those years. Truth is, many people who came home still died from events and wounds and experiences um, that occurred in Nam. So it was quite a toll on the American populace, and what a shame.
I'm sure you've talked to many different veterans that served in Vietnam and others that have served in Iraq, Afghanistan, and the many other wars that we've been involved with since the time of Vietnam. When you talk to these other men and women that served in uniform, do you see a lot of similarities to what you've went through in Vietnam? Are there a lot of differences? Because and I think we spoke about this last time I was on, I see a lot of similarities between Iraq and what happened in Vietnam.
Hmm. Well, this one similarity that is that I think that very few people left that experience without having post-traumatic
Yeah.
stress disorder (PTSD). I think that it was a traumatic experience to be away, traumatic experience to be afraid at times, a traumatic experience to be exposed to some of the things we were exposed to. Those things were traumatizing, and I didn't find a lot of Vietnam veterans coming home singing songs and happy. Instead, we came home pretty stunned and quiet, and it took us a long time. It seems to me it took a good while before we began to wear paraphernalia saying that we were Vietnam veterans. And for a while, we just kind of kept it on a down low. So yes, I think the common element was PTSD. I think also that it struck me, as crazy as it sounds, not as many people died, I'm delighted to say, in Iraq and the Desert Wars, Desert Storm, and the various campaigns that took place. But a lot of people came back as amputees with
Yeah.
I couldn't process that. I can't figure that one out. I mean, given how many people I see with missing body parts compared to the Vietnam veterans, I guess in Vietnam you pretty much they either killed you or you survived. And from those other wars, these more recent wars, you came home with marred for life, um, but not set back. I mean, um, there's a great thing on YouTube. It's
Mhm.
called Attitude, and I don't know if you've seen it, Rob, but this guy he lost both legs, I think, and one arm, and um, and his attitude is he is so upbeat, and he's married with a child. But if you don't know, just dial in, well, type in attitude, and it's quite inspiring. But the condition he came back in physically is something that seems all too common amongst the later wars. Vietnam did have booby traps and landmines, but I didn't see as many people coming back maimed from it, and that's just probably maybe that my narrow perspective.
Can you talk about how Vietnam changed you personally?
Sure, of course. I when I came back, I think a one way that my post traumatic stress disorder impacted me was I don't like loud noises, I don't like crowds, I don't like explosions, um, and the
Can
association.
I just interrupt quick? And I do want
Yeah,
you to
sure,
continue on.
please.
So, like, going to, or even not going anywhere, but just being in your house for 4th of July or New Year's Eve, Memorial Day, the list goes on, where people really blow their brains out with fireworks. How does that play with you? Even if you're just at home, just hanging around watching TV.
Well, I spoke very crossly, very sternly to my Rottweiler because when I was climbing under the bed, he had already gotten under the bed, and
Right.
I said, "You better get out from under this bed. This is my place to hide." truth be,
Listen,
truth.
I know that. I don't have a Rottweiler, but I got two golden labs. And when thunder, lightning, fireworks, all that stuff, I get it. I
Right.
definitely get where those dogs at. And their
Well,
hearing,
right,
regardless of what dog it is, their hearing is way better than ours. It's far superior. But go ahead.
right. Well, I want to confess that I was kidding about that. I don't have a Rottweiler either.
Oh, okay, okay. No dogs then, huh?
No,
No
no
dogs.
dog, no dog.
Oh, okay,
But
okay.
the the way it changed me was it caused me to be more guarded about institutions. I mean, I questioned why the government would send us into that combat theater. Um, but I mean, they did, and while there, I did the very best I could. And it took a long time to feel like maybe I had done something, but upon reflection, I realized that A, I was lucky to come home. B, that in fact the people who I was part of saving, and I was just a pilot. The people who I was responsible for saving, helped to save, excuse me, um, that they now have families that they wouldn't have had in many instances had they died out there in the middle of the bush. They would have not they would not have thrived and had a family. So it has made me reflect on why I was kept alive and made me want to do well, made me want to accomplish something with the life that I was granted because I didn't have to come home. I could have been, 58,000 number one, 58,001 right there easily. But any of us could have been. It did leave me with survivor's guilt, um, because I question how I had survived when I know a lot of good people who didn't make it. In fact, I wrote an article for the magazine. It's called. It's. I'll show you. I'll show it to you. It's called a Veteran, and it's published by the Vietnam Veterans of America, VVA, which has thousands of members, and it's kind of like almost like the official organization for Vietnam veterans. But I wrote an article in the May-June edition, and it's which was volume 43, number 3, and the article I wrote was in the column they call Speak Out, and that article is this one.
Mm-hmm.
So it talked about how
Now, who was in the picture? Is that you in the picture? I
yeah,
can't.
that is me in the picture. That is me in the picture.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But more importantly, where my finger is, that little gnarly thing there, my
Yeah.
finger, that's
Yeah, I
a
see
bullet
it.
hole. And that bullet
Yeah, I
hole,
can see that now.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah, that bullet hole we had just had a mission. The bullet just missed me. It crossed the ship and just missed my medic.
Wow.
And he took a photo of me when we landed. And I think I took a photo of him. And I'm grateful that he remembered years later to share it with me. But we left that aircraft and because it had been shot up some, and got another aircraft and took off maybe 20 minutes later. So, but it gets one of those things of, you need to get back on the horse that threw you, or you won't get back on again ever. So, but it has made me reflect and made me more spiritual of that experience, frankly.
Arnold Sampson, it's Dustoff is the name of the book. Definitely go and check it out. Buy it on Amazon if you could. It's definitely worth a read. And again, if you want to see our past interview, just go back and type in Arnold's name in there, and you can definitely listen to that whole interview about the book in general. I want to keep moving on and continue into a similar subject about Vietnam, but to something also that's more current, rather, excuse me, and kind of mix it in. You talked about your mistrust for the government. A lot of people have mistrust for the government right now, whether it was COVID, whether it was Ukraine, which is going on now with bringing all this money to Ukraine, and we're not really seeing, good results. Also, going back to Iraq and Afghanistan, 20 years in Afghanistan, nothing. We pull out. The same thing that's going on with the woman is going on now. They're being raped. They're being killed. All the stuff that was, the achievements, I should say, that these women made while we were in there, they're gone now due to the Taliban taking power again. And then Iraq obviously is, a straight up travesty of what happened there. Government lied about weapons of mass destruction. People went in there, died, missing limbs, as you stated earlier. Like I said, you talked about you don't believe that. Well, let me put it in the correct format of what you said. You have mistrust of the government because of what happened in Vietnam. I'm sure a lot of your friends and people that went there and served do also. With that said, you still have a lot of mistrust with everything I just spoke about, with all these other wars that are still going on or that are in the past, that are very skeptical of how they started and how they ended.
I do have a mistrust, but I frankly think the world would be better off without war. I don't know what purpose it serves. It's not a case of population control or thinning the cleansing the earth of what is it? Only the strong survive. I don't think it's any of that stuff. I think that it takes a terrible toll on human life, and so I do have mistrust. The fact of the matter is, though, I'll acknowledge this about the government and mistrust. I do give the VA credit for standing up as well as it has. I mean, it's a perfect no, but they have tried to acknowledge some of the damage done to the veterans and to our bodies and to our minds. and they try to, and through the VA is pension um, considerations and compensations, and because that without that, a lot of us would be probably destitute. So
Right.
it has tried to honor us best it can. Could it do better? Yes, but still, it beats a blank.
Not to get political, but just a question. Since you stated about the VA, I've heard a lot of good things. I've heard a lot of bad things. With that said, do you believe it's determined on who's in power? Obviously, certain politicians will push for more funding to the for the VA more so than others. Do you feel like it's like a Democrat Republican issue, or is it, it's mostly pretty fun, much I'm trying to frame it in the correct terminology. I would say is it's more so in good shape regardless of a party in power as far as the VA goes.
Um, it seems to me that one thing that might have changed had the last standoff occurred and turned out differently, then it would have impacted the Veterans Administration and Social Security Administration. But it turned out that the bill that was in question about refunding the government, getting it refinanced, getting it to get it back on its feet financially,
Mm.
um, that that suggests to me that the VA's funds are still vulnerable, as are the funds of the Social Security Administration. It does seem to be political.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know that it's benefiting anyone to do what they're doing, but I think it might be a political situation. It might be a political divide, but hopefully they'll come to their senses and will, in fact, keep the Veterans Administration going, continue to recognize those who sacrifice, to keep our country safe. So hopefully that'll be the case.
With these politicians, I highly doubt that, but we can keep the faith.
Uh,
And I'm not talking about one specific party. I'm talking about the corruption in the government runs very deep. It runs blue, it runs red, and it doesn't matter who's in there. The corruption just lights up like a Christmas tree. Uh,
yeah,
we'll
yeah,
we'll
true.
move on from that. Just my opinion. A lot of people know where I stand on this, and I just think there's so much corruption in government, regardless of who's in power. It's just
Right,
different. One party is more corrupt on the military industrial complex. The other
right,
party might be corrupt on big pharma. It's just all a joke and plain. It's really sad because, again, you've got people like you and many other people that have fought and died for freedom and democracy in this country. We have
mm,
these guys that I call them just gangsters that are just worried about stealing money and don't really care about the people. They make big promises during campaign season, and then when the campaign is over, it's we'll give you crumbs, and that's about all.
right.
But
True,
off of
true.
the cost. So, anyways, now that I got off my soapbox, we will continue with the conversation here, Arnold. Again, Arnold
Okay.
Sampson Dustoff. Definitely get the book on Amazon. Arnold, as we come to a close with the interview, we've talked about quite a few things with Vietnam, other wars in general. What do you hope people learn from our conversation today?
I hope that they'll learn that there is a perspective out there that's in print, and that they'll look for my book, Dust Off More Than Met the Eye, and other books that discussed Vietnam, to have them um, consider what their view of that war is, because it may also travel to other um, conflicts that have not yet sprung up. So the more enlightened our population is, the better off we are. Um, I I I think that the Vietnam experience probably so entranced our adversaries that they put off major scheming for the time being, because they thought we were engaged, and our engagement was very, very serious. So I'm hoping that the Vietnam pushed that 9/11 thing off until it actually occurred, that it just pushed it into the future because whoever had thought ill of America saw that we were in fact struggling with our troops in Vietnam and our effort in Vietnam. So it did serve a purpose. That was not the intended purpose, but it did serve a purpose. So I hope I answered your question.
No, you did fine, and I appreciate you coming on again. Arnold Sampson, the book is Dustoff. Where can people get the book? Do you have a website? How can they follow you? Give us all that jazz as we
Oh,
end the program.
well, thank you. If people want the book and just send, which they send, I have a few copies with me. I'll be glad to send it to them. It's not a very pricey book, but my email address is A as in Alpha, H as in Hotel, S as in Sierra, a second S as in Sierra, W as in Whiskey, A as in Alpha, M as in Mike, I as in India at AOL. AHSSWAMI at AOL. That's AHS Swami. If they send me a request, they can buy the book from me. They can buy it from Amazon. They can buy it from Goodreads, and they can buy it from Book Baby's Bookshop. So it's available in a lot of places. They can buy it at Target for that matter. So thank you, really. Thank you for asking that question, Rob.
No, Arnold, we can definitely get the book to anybody who wants it. You can contact me. I'll get you to Arnold. In general, it's no problem whatsoever. We'll just definitely get you to the right spot with that goes. And again, people listening, we hope you learned a lot from this conversation. We hope that people, look more into this story. Do you have a website, Arnold, or no?
I don't actually have a website, but if a person types in Arnold Sampson mediator, because I do mediation for a living,
Oh.
my Google page will pop up, and they'll find out how to reach me. And again, Arnold Sampson, Sampson, mediator, will give them all the information they need to contact me, both to purchase the book or just to comment on my views or lack thereof.
All right, we'll call it quits there. Again, Arnold Sampson, the book is Dustoff. I'm always grateful to have you on. This is your second appearance, and we'll definitely have you on in a couple months again. There's so many things happening in the world, rather, and militarily, where you can speak about, and we're very grateful to have your knowledge on this program. Arnold, thanks so much. Greatly appreciate you.
Thank you for having me, Robin. I hope you continue to do well and your wonderful podcast is more widely consumed and appreciated. So thank you so much. Very thoughtful of you.
All right, thanks so much.